Okay. Later this evening, we're going to hear from our health officer and the head of our Board of Health about coronavirus. But just at the start of the meeting, I heard some people clearing their throats, and I think it was just clearing your throats. But just because of the level of anxiety in the community right now, if you do have a cough, a persistent cough, I ask you to please leave. Yeah. Okay. So first order of business is the approval of minutes. We have minutes from several meetings, January 14th, 16th, 23rd, and 27th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes in block?
I'll move.
Moved by Ms. Fraga.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Cohen. Any corrections on the minutes?
Oh, I was just going to note that not all of us were present for the January 14th minutes.
Yes, I
think that
know,
was-
I got that.
Right, no, but just in terms of voting, that we should, those of
Yeah.
us who were not present should not vote
Yes,
to
that is
approve.
correct.
So do we need to separate those out? Okay,
No.
thank you.
Okay.
And I do have one minor correction to the minutes from January 27th. Lisa Serial shared it. I don't know that I have to read it out loud, but she copied Dolores late this afternoon. So Lisa Serial sent one revision to the January 27th
I
minutes.
didn't see that.
Okay. I'll forward it on to you just in case she forgot to copy you.
Can you just,
Yeah, basically it was, there was a statement that she had made regarding e-bikes and e-scooters. And she's saying that it should read, there's a large demand for safe pedestrian walkways and bikeways, and the municipality should get safe walking and biking infrastructure in place because an increase in e-bikes and e-scooters is happening all around us and will arrive here soon.
Okay.
So,
all right, so do you want to redo the motion to include that change?
I guess I should. Yes, I amend my motion to approve the minutes in block with that revision to the minutes for January 27th.
Okay.
Second.
And seconded by Ms. Fraga. Any other issues with the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution, the minutes pass. And next we come to announcements. And I'll start on my right with Ms. Pearl-Lambros. Any announcements this evening?
Yes, I have one announcement. So on March 17th, which is St. Patty's Day, there'll be a program titled Go Green to Make More Green, which is a collaboration between Sustainable Princeton, the Princeton Environmental Commission, and the Princeton Merchants Association. It'll be held from 8:30 to 10 a.m. at the community room at the library. And there'll be a series of brief presentations on the Climate Action Plan, planning actions for single-use plastics, energy efficient savings programs for businesses that are available, and on reusable takeout options for restaurants. After the presentation, there'll be breakout sessions to allow for more interaction between the participants, and everyone's welcome to attend. That's it.
Great, thank you. Ms. Niedergang, any announcements?
No announcements.
Mr. Cohen, any announcements?
No announcements.
Ms. Fraga, any
No
announcements?
announcements.
Just two quick announcements. Corner House is having Springtime on Broadway, honoring Leah McDonald and the Princeton Police Department. And the Princeton Police Department will be the very first honorees of the new James Floyd Community Partner Award. So that's scheduled for Friday, March 27th at the Chauncey Center between 6:30 and 10:30 p.m. And you can find more information and tickets online at cornerhousenj.org. And also, the Corner House Foundation.
Is your mic on?
No, it's not on.
Oh, I could have sworn I tapped it. You know what? Let me say that again. Those who know me know I love a captive audience, and I love to talk, so I'm only kidding. Anyway, the Corner House is having Springtime on Broadway, honoring Leah McDonald, and the Princeton Police Department will be the very first honorees of the new James Floyd Community Partner Award. And of course, James Floyd was Princeton Township's very first African-American mayor. And that event will be on Friday, March 27th, 2020 at the Chauncey Center between 6:30 and 10:30 p.m. And tickets can be found online at cornerhousenj.org. And also, scheduled Springdale Golf Course will be Corner House's Foundation's charity golf outing benefit, and information and means of purchasing sponsorships can also be found at cornerhousenj.org. Thank you.
I just have one quick announcement, which is there will be a free rabies clinic or did that already happen? That happened. There was a free rabies clinic this past weekend.
So it's a report, not an announcement.
And keep your eyes out. We have them occasionally, and it's a great opportunity to go. Okay. Are there any staff announcements? Yep. Ms. Stockton?
Beginning tomorrow for 3 days, Cherry Valley Road will be closed between Mountain View Road and Cherry Hill Road for some maintenance work. The hours of the closure are 8:30 a.m. to 3 o'clock p.m.
Great, thank you. Any other announcements? Okay, we'll move on to one of the highlights of this evening, which is our award of recognition.
Yes.
And I'd like to pass the microphone over to Councilwoman Fraga.
And I can say it's my favorite, and I'm sure my colleagues share my sentiments, that it's my favorite part of being on council is to get to recognize individuals and organizations who are going above and beyond in our community. So it gives me great honor, me da mucho honor, to be recognizing LALDEF, the Latin American Legal Defense and Education Fund, for all the advocacy work this 16-staff phenomenal women team and over 40-strong volunteer network does in Mercer County. Based from their beautiful house, La Casa Bienvenida, which is in nearby Trenton. LALDEF first came to my attention about a decade ago, thanks to my friend Veronica Olivares, who introduced me to the organization. She knew that I was looking for volunteer opportunities, and as a first-generation immigrant who understood too well the importance of the services LALDEF was providing, and who also wished my family had access to such a caring organization when we first immigrated, it was a match made in heaven. At the time, LALDEF was operating out of a room in the basement of Princeton Presbyterian. That was in 2004. Its founders were Maria Juega, Ann Reeves, Ryan Lilienthal, Alma Concepcion, and Karen Longo. Also the late Ann Yashuhara and Steve Traylor. LALDEF's mission initially was to support its Latino immigrant neighbors. As the organization grew and as the social and cultural demographics shifted in the region, LALDEF recognized both the other existing immigrant populations as well as new immigrant populations in the area. While Latinos are still the largest group that LALDEF serves, they serve and invite in all of our immigrant neighbors. They are a truly grassroots nonprofit organization defending the civil rights of all immigrants in Mercer County through their legal services team, facilitating their access to health care and education, and focus on building community in the Mercer County area. LALDEF recognizes that what is good for immigrant children and their families is good for all families. Some of the facts. LALDEF serves over 3,000 clients a year in their 5 arms of programming, which includes legal services, the Community ID program, adult education, Futuro, and advocacy and outreach. LALDEF is a unique not-for-profit in that they are both a direct services and advocacy organization, and that they are the biggest immigrant advocacy serving organization in Mercer County. In the Community ID program, which they administer at their headquarters, also at the Princeton Public Library, and through partnership with RISE in Hightstown, LALDEF has issued over 14,000 community IDs to date. The community ID can be used at various municipal and social services organizations, for example, to access emergency medical services, and also at the schools. LALDEF has a cohort of 60 students in Futuro, and Futuro is LALDEF's college readiness program, which now includes 30 juniors and seniors in Trenton and 30 juniors and seniors in Princeton. And this June, they will be celebrating the graduation of 26 Futuro students, which are seniors. Futuro has a 100 college matriculation rate for all of its students, which is quite impressive. Yes. In their legal services department, they offer low-cost assistance with the filing of applications for citizenship, deferred action for childhood arrivals, which we know as DACA, self-petitions for victims of domestic violence under the Violence Against Women Act, and U and T visas for victims of crime, among other services. Adult education offers ESL, HSE, computer literacy, citizenship preparation, and other learning and literacy initiatives for the community. As an advocate of immigrant and human rights, LALDEF supports current policy and legislative movements aimed to increase access for immigrants to better life opportunities. For example, the recently passed driver's licenses for immigrants legislation in the state of New Jersey, which I'm proud to say our mayor and municipality advocated for as well. Our immigrant community has been experiencing hardships and are more vulnerable now than ever before. We should always keep in mind that we are a nation of immigrants, and we ought to welcome and aid the most vulnerable. LALDEF has been doing just that, working hard for many years, and we can see the difference LALDEF has made in the community by the lives improved of the people they serve. It gives me great pleasure to acknowledge and give LALDEF the recognition the organization deserves. Thank you. And you know, I'm usually not long-winded, and I promise this is it, but I wish to acknowledge the founding members that are here. Can you please stand to be acknowledged? Thank you for doing this. And I would also ask our current and former board members, staff, and volunteers, please stand so you too can be acknowledged. You play an integral role. Thank you. So now I get to... Well,
You should face us.
face us, and then we'll take a photo facing the other way. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Leticia, for that beautiful speech introducing us. My name is Dina Paulson McEwen. I'm the new executive director of LALDEF. Just about 2 months I've been at LALDEF. I'm totally in love with LALDEF. I'm so honored to be here, and I mean it's such an incredible history that I'm joining of people who have created and uplifted LALDEF. I just want to say that we are very grateful to be here in Mercer County. Trenton is not that far from Princeton. I'm learning a lot about the region through LALDEF, and I do know for sure that we couldn't do the work we do without a benevolent community in the region who also shares the values that we share, and we're very grateful to have so many friends and partners in our continued growth. And I'd like to pass the microphone over, I could say something, to one of our staff members, Michelle, who's also here tonight.
Excuse me. Hi, I wrote a little speech. Hello all. My name is Michelle Allendes, and I am the Legal Services Coordinator at LALDEF. I was first introduced to LALDEF in fall of 2018 when taking an immigration course at TCNJ. One of the requirements was to go to LALDEF as a volunteer. I was immediately drawn to legal services because I understood more than anyone the immigrant experience. Both my parents are immigrants, and through their struggles and hardships, I was able to have a better life for myself, for my future children, and so on and so forth. I want to also say that LALDEF is one of the best organizations because of the dedicated and passionate staff that go above and beyond in providing a safe haven for the immigrant community. There's a difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy for me tends to be very superficial. It is the caring and understanding of others, the occasional "I'm sorry." However, empathy is the ability to experience the feelings of others, and it goes beyond sympathy. Each and every staff member puts themselves in the shoes of our clients. Puts themselves in the shoes of our clients. We listen and we care. We go home thinking about our clients, and we wake up in the next morning thinking about how we can make the life of that individual better. We need empathy more than ever now. It is important to remember that at the end of the day, we are all ordinary people. But when we come together, we are able to do extraordinary things. And that is what LALDEF does each and every day. So thank you.
Yeah, I think, would anybody else like to say something? Chara, would you like to speak? Or
My name is Patricia Fernandez Kelly. I am privileged to be the chair of the board at LALDEF. And in addition to recognizing the great contributions of the founders of this organization, which I joined in 2004, I also want to mention and thank the members of our board, including Lorraine Goodman, and others who are not present here, but who are wonderful, John Hauner in particular, but also Reverend Karen Hernandez Granzin, David Long, and others who are part of this effort. We do have a magical organization right now. We do struggle in order to raise the funds necessary to serve our community of immigrants, but we are proud of what has been achieved in 14 years. So thank you very much for this recognition.
maybe right here. Jessica should be. Do you want to ask Andy? Hey, Andy, thank you. Actually, let me move this.
Thanks, Leticia. All right, next up, we have the introduction of our 2020 budget, and I'd like to invite up Sandra Webb, our CFO, and also Mr. DeShield, our administrator, to go over the 2020 budget. And just by way of introduction, this is the first of a multi-step process. So even if we introduce the budget tonight, there's a period where there may be amendments and changes to it, and it'll come back to us in a couple weeks for final approval. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Shield.
Good evening. I'm just going to start with just a broad overview of where we are in terms of the budget process and just take you back a little bit. We start this process in August, September timeframe, where we begin with the getting information from different departments in terms of the capital plan. Later in that year, between October and November, we have the departments putting together their proposals for the budget. Those are then reviewed by myself. It actually goes to the CFAC, the Citizens Advisory Committee, for their review. We actually met and reviewed the budget twice. Our first review about a month ago, and then just recently at the beginning of this month to review the budget. And again, this is the introduction of the budget. What this allows is for the budget to be published and open to the public for public comment. We will have a public hearing on April 6th for the public to come in, and at that time we'll also have the CFAC committee provide a presentation on the budget. Between now and then, it's the time to have discussions on the budget. If there are some amendments, and then we usually will do some amendments to the budgets between now and the introduction of the budget. And I'll remind you, as usual, we can usually do amendments if they're minor amendments and pass the budget that night. If it is a major amendment, and we can define that a little later, we would have to make those amendments, publish the budget again, and then have another public hearing. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Sandy and have her walk you through the budget.
Okay, here we go. This shouldn't be too painful, I don't think, as long as this works. So just a quick overview of our budget right now. We are up $675,000 from 2019. And we have, I'll talk to the point a little bit later, an appropriation in the budget of over $2 million where we will pay down on some projects where we've spent the money, some capital projects, and I have not issued debt service for them yet. So this is in lieu of us issuing debt service. And again, I'll talk to that point a little bit more in a later slide. In 2019, we had budgeted for the first time the full-time fire department staff. They were not actually hired until 2020. So the salary number, now that we fine-tuned the number of firefighters that we've hired and the per diems that we've hired, that number has come down significantly. So when we look at, again, the salary is down about $338,000, and the other expense is up a little bit over $1 million for a net of $675,000. When we look at what drives this budget, where did we see increases and where did we see reductions? The first increase that I have on the slide is about $240,000 for the employee group insurance. That's our medical plan, and that ties right in line with the number of firefighters that we hired. When we put together the 2019 budget, everything was tied into just a salary number, which was just really a placeholder. And now that we fine-tuned the number of firefighters, we were able to break out what that cost us in terms of insurance. The other big increase that we see is the Historic Sites Office, and this is a request by the department for historic preservation district design guidelines. So we'll have that discussion as we go through this budget, whether that is something that council wants to move forward with, and if it is, then we'll leave it in there, and if not, then we'll adjust the budget accordingly. Pensions, we always see increases here. They flip every couple of years between whether it's PERS or PFRS. This particular year, we have the PFRS for the police for their retirement up about $134,000. Again, I'll talk about the $1.8 million for the deferred charges unfunded. We also have in this budget interest on notes for the first time in a couple of years. I know we're going to issue some sort of debt service this year. It depends, I'll get with Deanna and see where we are with moving forward through some projects. We'll talk with bond counsel and with our financial advisor and see whether it's more critical for us to go right to bonds as opposed to doing notes. But we're too early in the game yet to really know what that number is going to be. But we wanted to at least put a placeholder in there. And Stony Brook Regional Sewer Authority, this is, I think, the second, maybe third year. I think it's the second year where we've actually seen an increase. Our flows are up, which means we share a greater portion of the Stony Brook of their expenses and their operating budget. Usually during this budget process, sometimes it's at the end, David Goldfarb will come and do a presentation basically from Stony Brook and, tell us why our flows are up, which we usually know why they're up. And there was a strong push in last year's budget to hire an I&I engineer, and I think we're at that juncture where we can start to move forward with that, and hopefully this number will come down going forward. So some of the decreases that we saw in this budget, almost a flip between the fire salary and the group insurance. We reduced the salary now that we have we fine-tuned the number there. We also have a reduction in the police salary line, and that accounts for 2 retirees that have already occurred this year and 2 resignations that the chief is not planning to fill right now. Maybe later in the year, probably not until we go into the 2021 budget. And again, I mentioned the retirement systems. Sometimes they're up, sometimes they're down. And in this particular case, the PERS number dropped a little bit. And our debt service has dropped significantly by a little over $2 million. So on the revenue side, what we've seen is when we put together the 2019 budget, again, because of the fire, we anticipated using more of our surplus than we normally would. So we saw a significant decrease in the use of surplus. Capital reserves, this one we look at every year because it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And there's going to be a time when this is a capital fund balance, which accumulates based on reductions that when we cancel bond ordinances. So we know eventually this is going to disappear completely. We had some small increases, reductions in the fees and permits and in the fire and housing inspection. If you remember last year, I think it was early in the year, council had the fire, Joe Novak, go through and look and see where we were in comparison to other communities with some of our fees, and there was a push then to reduce everything, and then we see the reflection in the revenues of a huge decrease in the fees and permits and fire and housing inspections. And when we look at the increases, we have rebounded a little bit. This is one of the double-edged swords when we talk about municipal courts. Certainly we don't want to have that be a moneymaker, but for the last maybe 3 or 4 years, we have seen a lot of decreases in the court, whether it's for number of tickets being written. And we know when we went through the meter installation last year, we had a period of time where we were not doing enforcement. There was a period of time where the meters were we weren't even collecting, revenues on them. So all of that ties into the municipal court revenue. The sewer rental, I don't know that's a good term. We had this conversation earlier today with Eve. It's actually the sewer charge that's part of your tax bill. It's identified in the budget as sewer rentals. And when I went back and looked at this one, we had actually kept the anticipated revenue the same since 2017. Certainly we could have increased it a little bit just based on the usage of people and what we were seeing. So this year we decided to bring that increase up a little bit. Cable TV is the money that we get from Comcast and Verizon, and you all have had that conversation whether you're turning it over to TV 30, or we're using it in the budget for taxation. And this year, we decided to bring in a little bit more revenue for cable TV. And one of the questions that we were asked is, what do we generally collect in that? And generally, it's about $350,000, $370,000. This year, right now, we've only collected about $300,000, but I think we're still waiting for another check from Comcast. Delinquent taxes, this one, again, is one that deviates every year. It's up and it's down. So we've anticipated a little bit more based on the taxes that were not collected from the prior year. And then we have a small tax increase for the amount to be raised by taxation. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the debt service and what this deferred charge unfunded means for us. So we try to always, when we're doing debt service, and bond counsel is great, and our financial advisors are great, where they structure our debt service so that when issues fall off of our, off our charts because we've paid them off, that's when they'll increase or, put small increases in for new sales that we have. I thought we were going to do a bond sale last year. We got through the whole year without having a cash flow problem, so I know we're going to need to do that this year, and that's why I mentioned that we have a note increase in there for $300,000. And one of the things that council was cognizant of, and it came from CFAT back in 2018 when our 5-year special emergency for consolidation fell off of our appropriations. We didn't need to do that anymore. Mark and I pushed for CFAT to let's still pay down on some of the ordinances that we haven't funded, and we wanted them to keep in about $500,000, which would have been the offset of the emergency that we did. Well, what they did back then was they said, you know what, we're in good shape. Let's bring in over $2 million. And we were commended from our auditor for doing that. He said it doesn't happen very often where, usually towns want to just issue debt service, where we were proactive and we put an amount in our budget, which actually cleaned up all of our old ordinances pre-consolidation. And to me, that was huge. That now anything that I'll sell bonds or notes for is not going to be before 2013. So, and our thought process with this was, let's not have the peaks and valleys in the debt service and the deferred charge unfunded, where we see it way up one year, and this is a perfect year where I could have just cut that appropriation by $2 million. But then what happens in 2021 where then I have to increase it by $2 million? So this was more or less to try and keep things constant. And of course, the most important slide I think that everybody wants to know about is what's the impact on the taxes. So the direction that we had from the members of council that sit on the Citizens Finance Advisory was to not bring a budget back that was more than 1.9% in the tax rate increase. And that's what we did. I think that the last look, it was about at 1.79%. So, they did their homework. We got our pencils out. And so for the average homeowner, that's about a $70 increase in just the municipal tax rate. So we can take questions, but that's where we are tonight. We're asking that you'll introduce this budget. There's a couple housekeeping things on the agenda as well, one of which is a cap bank ordinance that needs to be introduced before the budget, and then certainly the budget introduction.
Okay. Are there any questions for Sandy or Mark on the budget?
I don't have a question, but I'd just like to make a comment based on my very hopeful conversation with Sandy and Mark earlier today. Is one of the things I noticed looking over the budget is there's often a big gap between the money that's allocated for a year and the money that was actually spent. And Sandy's answer to that was there were two criteria there. And I just think people may be interested in knowing that, if you don't mind just running through that. Some charges are still coming in from 2019, and then why we need to leave room to maneuver. You can
Absolutely.
Explain it more eloquently than I can. Thank you.
And actually, I think you did a pretty good job. Basically, what happens in the budget is when you see the line item budget, the expended portion of the budget, that is expended as of 12/31. There are bills that will come in usually between the end of the year and probably around April of some time. that are still charged to the last year's budget. So some of those numbers, if you look at them, it looks like it's not spent. Portions of those will be spent throughout the year. In addition to that, because of the method in which we put together our budgets, we don't have the ability to transfer money until the end of the year. As a result of that, you will see that we put additional money in the budget to ensure that we have enough money to get us through the year to the point where we can then transfer money. So you have to put those two into an account before you can look at it. But what's nice is any of that money that is not expended comes back in surplus, and we use it to hold down taxes for the following year.
And then just for the benefit of the newer council members too, your people can set up appointments with both you and Sandy to go more line by line through the budget and answer questions that anybody might have, or if people want to team up and do it in groups of two. I strongly encourage that everybody makes an appointment to get all of their questions answered and go through the weeds on this. It's really important that everybody feels comfortable and understands the budget before it comes back for a final vote. And at our next meeting, typically we'll invite Scott Sillers and CFAC to do a presentation. And often as part of that, there'll be a forward look too over the next several years to see, not just, we try not to do the budget just this year, looking at this year. And Sandy spoke to some of that, but you want to do it looking at what's the impact on next year, what's the impact on the next 3 or 4 years. So we're planning ahead as well and being responsible.
Yeah, I'll just make a comment that Sandy's good enough to have set up an appointment with me, and I can share that also with other council if you'd like to just I want to do a deep dive, as I call it, but I appreciate your time. Yeah, and thank you. And I do want to make one comment. I know enough now to be dangerous because I went to a training session on budgeting, and I have to say when we look at the various budgets and numbers that the different municipalities have throughout New Jersey, I felt really good coming back and seeing why we have AAA credit rating, because our surplus is it's very robust and compared to other municipalities, and going into affordable housing and other things that we're going to need to do in the future, I feel very confident that we're sound. So thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions on the budget? Okay, so we'll take up the first item related to the budget, which is Ordinance 2020-12, Princeton calendar year 2020, ordinance to exceed the municipal budget appropriation limits and to establish a cap bank. And the title of this always sounds a little bit alarming, but it is something that we do every year. And Mark or Sandy, could you just explain, I think you went over it already, but if you just explain why we're doing this and what it actually means.
Right, so we're lucky in Princeton where we don't have cap problems, but there are towns that, last year we brought in, I hate to keep using the fire, but it was such a great example, where we brought an additional appropriation in our budget of $800,000 that gets raised within this municipal cap, and a lot of towns couldn't do that, but because we do this ordinance, and we may not be using it this year, but then we'll have a bank for 2 years that when we have, hopefully we won't have anything like fire again, but, on a year when you do have something that's significant that has to be raised within the cap, you have a little bit of bank sitting on your book, so to speak, that we can turn to and go ahead and use. So it may not necessarily be something that we're using this year, and this is an ordinance, like Liz mentioned, that, when you first see it, it's a little alarming, but it's something that we do every year to just protect ourselves for the next 2 years.
Great, thank you. And is there a motion to introduce this ordinance?
So moved.
No, second.
So it's been moved by Ms. Niedergang, seconded by Mr. Cohen. Any questions or comments on this ordinance? All right, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perrone-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
And the public hearing for this ordinance will be on March 23rd, 2020. And next is Resolution 2114, resolution to introduce the 2020 municipal budget. Is there a motion for that?
So moved.
It's moved by Mr.
Second.
Cohen and seconded by Mr. Williamson. Should we do a roll call for this?
Yes.
Okay, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perrone-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
And like was mentioned before, this is the votes that were taken tonight were to put the budget out in the public. So to get public comment, I'd like to open it up if anybody has any comments on the budget right now, and we'll be holding a public hearing on this in a couple weeks. But I wanted to give people the opportunity if anybody wanted to speak to it tonight. All right, seeing no one, we'll move on. And next is comments from the public for items that are not already on the agenda. It looked like nobody had signed up ahead of the meeting, but I just wanted to open the floor again if anybody would like to speak to anything that's not already on the agenda. Okay, then we will move on to reports, and I'd like to invite up our health officer, Jeff Grosser, and the chair of our Board of Health, Dr. George DiFernando. And we invited Jeff and George here tonight to brief us on coronavirus and COVID-19. I know there's a lot of questions in the community. This is a quickly moving situation. We wanted to brief council on what's being done locally and what the community can do, what different community groups can be doing or should be doing, and what to expect over the next several weeks and months. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Grosser.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to share with the community some steps the municipality is taking in response to the ongoing outbreak of SARS-2, which is the virus that causes COVID-19. We'd also like to share some steps families and organizations can assist with preparations on their own. And this is all coming on a night that Governor Murphy hours ago just declared a state of emergency over the ongoing outbreak. We understand there's concern and would like to assure Princeton residents that we've been preparing for the potential that we may see cases closer to home. The municipality has assembled a task force to coordinate our efforts. The team is composed of our health officer, Board of Health officials, Chief of Police, Business Administration, Princeton First Aid and Rescue, Access Princeton, the Recreation Department, Corner House, Councilwoman Fraga, a local pediatrician that serves as physician liaison to schools in Princeton, Princeton Senior Resource Center, Princeton University, and several other key staff members. This is a multifaceted response, as Mayor Lempert alluded to, and the situation is evolving quickly, as we've been witnessing across the world. At this time, we do not have confirmed cases in Princeton or Mercer County, and the risk of the illness to general public still remains low. Our goal through this report to council this evening is to highlight our primary goal should be to protect our most vulnerable population. Those vulnerable populations include people at a higher risk of severe illness, otherwise known as underlying health conditions that include heart disease, lung disease, or diabetes, those with weakened immune systems, people who are pregnant, and older adults. The Princeton Board of Health and Princeton Health Department have focused on the following activities to prepare for this situation. As the situation evolved in January and February, the Princeton Health Department has contacted travelers returning from affected areas to conduct risk assessments and conducted monitoring for a 14-day period following arrival into the United States. This facet of the response is conducted with strict adherence to protocols established by the Centers for Disease Control and New Jersey Department of Health. Coordinated with school administrations and school nurses to review guidance materials and response activities which are changing more than once a day. We've met with Mercer County superintendents to discuss logistics of outbreak response and school dismissal scenarios as outlined by the Department of Education. We've consulted with medical professionals upon request. The department responds 24/7 and will maintain availability regarding ongoing testing, which again is another facet of this that is changing quickly. We've shared guidance and preparation materials with public health partners within the community, such as first responders, urgent care facilities, child care facilities, and faith-based organizations. We provided presentations to community groups on SARS-2 to increase awareness, promote prevention, and discourage stigmatization and encourage preparedness. We've coordinated a meeting with first responders, Princeton University, Princeton schools, and municipal officials to discuss expected increase of cases in the United States as well as in our local area. We've met with Princeton business leaders to review CDC guidance for businesses and employers, encouraging business owners to follow recommended strategies to keep employees and the public safe. We've applied for and we've been awarded a strengthening local public health capacity training scholarship through the New Jersey Association of County and City Health Officers, which will help us cover some of our COVID-19 preparedness costs. And we've worked to maintain the most up-to-date information on our municipal webpage and worked to make it as relevant as possible to the various groups in town. I want to take a few minutes to go over what families and organizations are encouraged to do. Remain up to date on current status and recommendations through the course of the outbreak. Links to the Centers for Disease Control and New Jersey Department of Health websites are available on the announcements page of the Princeton Municipal website. These pages are updated daily. These are the best sources of news for anybody that's trying to find out more information about the outbreak. Please monitor travel restrictions if you're planning a trip abroad by visiting the CDC travel page, which again is linked on our website. If you've recently traveled to an affected region, follow public health restrictions and guidance upon your return. Ensure everyone in the family has had a flu shot. Review your family or organizational preparedness plans. Before I turn the floor over to Dr. DiFernando, I'd just like to highlight a health department team member who's been exemplary through this response to the situation. Kathy Corwin, who's our Princeton's public health nurse, is on the front lines of the situation. She's the first contact with concerned residents. She clarifies treatment and testing questions for clinical nurses and doctors. She handles all travel-related and contact-related monitoring for Princeton residents for this illness, as well as 80 other reportable diseases. She does all of this 24/7, and has a council priority set in January to reevaluate health department staffing, working to hire a full-time public health nurse is necessary now more than ever. And I want to make sure that's understood by mayor and council, so when the time comes to finalize our staffing, this would be an item that we bring up with regards to some of her actions and efforts that, although in times of epidemics, it seems like it's there, even in times of normal work and monitoring, she's still utilized primarily for educational purposes, but she's always needed. I'm now going to turn the floor over to Dr. DiFernando, who will speak more on the current state of events. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Jeff, and thank you, Board, for hearing us tonight. I have a few comments that are directed as much to the citizens behind me, perhaps, as to the council. At least two of the council members here have worked as liaison to the Board of Health, and I've worked with most of the other council members on various activities. The first would be to make a distinction between the Board of Health and the Department of Health. Boards of Health have existed in New Jersey for over 100 years. They were really established during 100 years ago for the both relevant then and still relevant today idea that municipalities in New Jersey and around the country can use professionals to help them guide their actions during times of scientific difficulty, to keep the scientific decisions somewhat separate from political input. That doesn't mean that there isn't liaison between boards of health and councils and the mayor, as we're seeing tonight, but that was the whole idea over 100 years ago, because there was a tension then between what was encouraged or being talked about in the public sphere, and the idea was to create something of a safe harbor for professionals to discuss issues of public health importance that would be, again, somewhat outside of the sphere of politicization. Our board consists of, among other people, infection control nurse, 3 physicians, behavioral health specialists, epidemiologists, and in times of non-emergencies, often we will have somewhat dry meetings that go from meeting to meeting. But in emergencies such as this, both myself as chairman of the board and the council and the mayor and other people, the idea is that these are people that can be on call to both advise me, advise Jeff, and advise other members of the council. So I would urge the council to review the membership of the board. Many of you have relationships with different members on that board, and if you do, you should certainly feel comfortable in contacting either them directly, myself directly. We don't really stand on ceremony that you have to go through a particular chain of command to contact people on the board, although we do attempt to maintain something of a consistent public messaging campaign within the board, like we all should. The second comment I would make, again, for the people behind me as well as the board, is to make a couple of careful distinctions that at least have helped me understand what's going on between us. One is the difference between the virus that is causing this outbreak, which is variously called either the SARS-2 virus or the SARS novel coronavirus 2, and the disease that is caused by that virus, and that is COVID disease, and that stands for coronavirus, and the D stands for disease, COVID-19. The reason I make that distinction, I think it's important for all of us and as well as the citizens to consider that distinction, is that in almost every press report you see, those two situations, that is infection with the virus, with or without disease, and then disease, are lumped as cases. Those, in fact, are not cases. Many of them are infections. This is not to minimize what's going on, but to help us think through what is happening so we can be as clear as possible. Right now, I believe the number in New Jersey today is 10 presumptive infections, and then a certain number of those, and it's a little hard to tell by the table that I saw on the New Jersey website just a couple of seconds ago, how many of those people are actually ill with SARS-2, and that is have COVID-19, and how many of them are contacts of those patients or just quote-unquote regular civilians who have been tested but are not diseased. This might help, and this will help understand why we'll be seeing people probably in our community who are infected with the SARS-2 virus but are not diseased. And that helps scientists like myself, but perhaps the council members or other people will not see it as a distinction, but I find it very helpful. The second thing I would mention, and this terminology came into great currency in the past 36 hours, is the idea of what the public health actions are and then the parallel actions in the community and for individuals. The public health actions that have been put out there over the past 36 hours are under the heading of either containment or mitigation. And with containment, the idea is if you find a person either with infection or COVID-19, you attempt to surround that human, contain the infection around that person. Either the direct people living with that person, the first-degree people that they may have been in contact with, a Lyft driver, as we've seen in New York City, or maybe an Uber driver. And what we try to do is, as quickly as possible, contain the infection to that small circle. What happens during that period for the community is that while containment is maintained, the community, both individuals, families, and businesses, have an opportunity to prepare. In the great setting, the infection is totally contained, and the preparation that we do for further spread turns out to be good education, but not something that we wind up doing. This happened during H1N1 a few years ago. It happened during SARS-1, where it broke out in Chicago and broke out in Toronto, but never got to New Jersey. So there was preparation that was done. It was contained in Chicago. It was contained in Toronto. Right now, in certain parts of the United States, and obviously around the globe, they've moved from containment to mitigation. What mitigation means from a public health point of view is there is now, instead of point localized spread, there's spread throughout the community. And when that spread throughout the community occurs, doing that individual containment is often futile. There's so many people who wind up being infected that you really can't get into a situation of identifying one person, surrounding them, helping isolate them, and further stopping the spread. At that point, the public health community talks about doing mitigation and different mitigation activities, and that's when the businesses and the community members and the organizations start doing this phrase that has, again, become very popular, social distancing. That is, we haven't been able to stop the SARS-2 virus from spreading throughout the community, so people, especially people at highest risk, sit there and say to themselves, I better protect myself. And what are people telling me? What is public health telling me and clinical medicine telling me about how to protect myself? Everybody's heard these, but I'm going to say them again. That is, people with heart disease, people with lung disease, people with kidney disease, people with diabetes, people with autoimmune illnesses, and then that great vague phrase, older Americans. Older Americans variously talks about people who are over 60. I can tell you that it's being close to 70. You know, it's like, geez, 60, those people are really young. The old people are actually anybody who's, you know, in the next decade. But the data that was just shared and is repeatedly shared is that the average age of a person with COVID disease, that's really a redundancy, with COVID-19, but I like to say COVID disease to remind people it's a disease. The average age of COVID disease patient is 70. The average age of a COVID disease death is 80, but that is no guarantee that you can't get COVID disease at 60, 50, 40, 30, or 10. The numbers are much smaller. That is where the reassurance comes in when you reassure a parent. But as a parent myself, I tend to get a little anxious when someone says, the odds are your child is not going to get ill. I don't like that. I want to hear there's no chance your child's going to get ill. We can't say that. We can say there's a much higher chance that your aunts, your uncles, your mothers, your fathers, or those members of your family or the people that you know who have heart disease, lung disease, diabetes, autoimmune illnesses, they're the ones that are likely to develop the disease caused by SARS-2 and have a very bad outcome. That's what we're trying to do right now. I believe, and I think the data backs it up, there's no positive cases of SARS-2 infection in Mercer County right now. There have been tests that have been set out, both from our community, which actually has sent out a larger number of potential tests than, for instance, Burlington County. So that the town of Princeton, with 31,000 people, but also with a lot of people in the Princeton University community, we've had a lot of people under investigation, and there have been no positives so far. I can't say there's no virus in the community, but we haven't found it. That means our businesses and our citizens are mostly in a position still of planning. This is a great opportunity to keep planning. What are you going to do? What are you going to do about your aunts and your uncles, your mothers, your fathers, your sisters and your brothers who have these other illnesses? What are you going to do about yourself? There will be a moment, most likely, that we're in the situation like Bergen County, one of my home counties back in the day, is right now. Multiple positives, and the Bergen County municipal communities are going, are we at containment phase? Are we at mitigation phase? There's no flag that gets raised. When suddenly you move from containment to mitigation, there's no magic moment that occurs. But people in Bergen and in that part of New Jersey have multiple cases that therefore it's more likely that it's being spread within the community. We have a bit of time here, and that's why the mayor, myself, Jeff, many other people are running as fast as we can every day to encourage everybody to get prepared. I just reviewed the law with the help of a lawyer who supports the New Jersey Boards of New Jersey Local Boards of Health Association, of which I'm on the executive committee. And prior to the governor declaring an emergency, boards of health can only close a few organizations and a few meeting places in a town. We can recommend closures. We can encourage closures. But it is not clear to me, but I'll be researching this in the coming hours and days as to whether the governor's emergency response invokes the New Jersey Emergency Health Powers Act. It may or may not have done that. If it did invoke the New Jersey Emergency Public Health Powers Act, or Health Powers Act, which was enacted a few years after 9/11 and the anthrax problems, that will give both municipal governments as well as boards of health other authorities to make more determinative statements to our churches, to our community organizations, to our businesses, to the extent that we have to. We'd all like to give advice to these organizations to protect their own members, the people who are coming to their activities, the people that might be passing through Princeton, but it may get to a situation where myself, Jeff, the council, the Commissioner of Health of New Jersey, or even the people at the federal level feel that more definitive containment actions are demanded rather than recommended. So as Mayor Lempert has found out and Jeff knows, I can go on for a very long time. I think I'm going to stop it there with those ideas. And obviously both Jeff and I would be more than happy to take various questions from interested members.
We'll start with Ms. Fraga.
Yes. And first, I want to thank you for, I know you're every day trying to stay on top of the information as it comes out, and so that it can be applied to whatever contingency plan we need to put in place. But no, really, I haven't heard a lot. I know there are probably organizations, including, I understand, community partners, including, I understand, the school district has is going to or has convened a meeting with community partners on what we need to do to address the needs of our vulnerable communities, because I know, many of us, including myself, already trying to prepare, stock up on non-perishables and whatever else we may need in case we have to self-quarantine with our family. But, there's many families in our community that not going to work and staying home means not being able to feed their children. And so I just, I want to make sure that we understand what those needs are and what I know our community partners, including with Human Services, are working on that. But as the municipality, what we may be able to put in place to make sure our families are taken care of.
And on the way over here, I was listening, and while actually sitting here streaming through my hearing aids, listening to the press conference that was given by the President and by Vice President Pence. Apparently tomorrow there's going to be an announcement as to different types of financial incentive or financial payments, including things like a cut in the payroll tax, and also some type of protections of people who would need to stay home and not lose wages. It was not clear at all what those protections would be on the federal level. It's not clear what those protections would be, if any, on the state level. But this is currently the dialogue within, and then it sort of extends past public health, although public health people will tell you nothing extends past public health. But it extends past public health, where public health people are saying, we really can't expect people to stay home if they're going to lose their salaries and their jobs. That is for people who have the money in their back pocket to make that available. So I know, Jeff, you've been trying to make sure everybody knows about the New Jersey
I was going to say, not
law.
only that, but we have many employees who don't have sick leave.
Well,
So-
they're supposed, any employee in New Jersey, but I'm not the lawyer, but based on the October 2018 law in New Jersey, even part-time employees are supposed to have access to up to 40 hours of paid sick leave, if I understand it correctly.
And the ongoing guidance as well to business owners is to try to be as flexible as possible with employees, particularly with scenarios like this. That was especially true in the message that I had with the local merchants last week.
Right, because I know we don't want a situation where we have sick employees that are, feel that they need to come to work. That would just make it worse, I think, situation worse.
Because one of the things we're trying to do right now, we don't presume, just because this law passed in October of 2018, that it's actually being implemented.
Right.
So one of our messages at the moment during preparation to businesses is to gently, or maybe more than gently, remind them, you realize that this law is in effect. There is supposed to be provision for full-time workers, part-time workers to have up to 40 hours of sick leave. Now, paid sick leave. Now, you notice 40 hours of paid sick leave for a full-time employee is 1 week, and we're generally talking about 2 weeks of self-isolation. So even in the best of circumstances, it wouldn't cover that, and let alone people who don't feel they're empowered to even ask for sick leave, even if the law says they can have it.
So whether funding or help we can have access to, we should definitely seek it. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just recommend the CDC has a excellent site, and they have a whole section there for businesses. And I think it goes both ways too, where we have sort of a workaholic community here, and you're not a hero by going to work if you're sick. You're actually a public health menace. So people should just be cautious and stay home and be good citizens.
Thanks, man. Jeff and George, thanks for a very informative presentation. Just going back, and thanks, I know George made that distinction between SARS-2 as the virus that then can possibly cause COVID-19 as the disease. There's been several news reports, I just remember getting dressed this morning, that there was a possible patient at the local hospital in Hopewell. And then I've seen other, even just Googling it, I've just seen other news reports popping up recently. I know Jeff said there are no confirmed cases in Mercer County. Now, not sure if that means there's, I don't know if you can comment on that. I'm not sure if that means that there's someone that possibly has the SARS-2 virus but has not developed the disease. And then just me not being an expert, I know I've also seen where there's confirmations have to come from the CDC. So maybe you can comment on if there is any truth to this.
The first thing I would say on that is, obviously, there's some caveat on, if I knew about the patient's specific details, I couldn't tell you. But, so I'll give you a more generic answer, and that is that by listening to emergency room doctors, both that I talk to directly and then I see on television, frankly, just like you do, it is rapidly being included in the testing of people who come in. I had a pneumonia event in October myself. If I came in now with a pneumonia post a virus, they would say, okay, let's test him with influenza, let's test him with this, let's test him with that. They will also test, they would have also tested me for SARS-2. So we're going to see more and more patients that get admitted to Capitol Health, to the Princeton Hospital, to Hamilton Hospital, because it is becoming now standard practice when someone gets admitted with a pulmonary problem, and there are lots of pulmonary problems in people 60, 70, and 80. That is an extremely common event. And so we'll see more, and this, again, thank you for raising the question, because more and more we'll see people who are under investigation but not necessarily diseased. The more we can test that number, and so that's why this argument about, can you tell me how many you've tested, at least to me, is irrelevant. I want to know if the test is available at the point of care. I don't really care the number of tests that are done. I want to make sure that they're tested. The test is in the hands of the doctors, the physician assistants, the family nurse practitioners, that they can make a test result in a patient when they're making a differential diagnosis.
I'd just like to add to that as well. So testing criteria has changed drastically when this first emerged back in January, February, where the only individuals that were being sought to be tested were those returning from countries that had some type of advisory, where there's widespread outbreaks, what have you. So those individuals, they find their home at home with their local health department. If they meet those criteria as just visiting and then being symptomatic, to what Dr. Fernando mentioned, the local health department gets contacted by their physician, and then we would sign off on the test to have it shipped to either the state or to the lab in CDC. Once the state testing came on board, we were able to test more patients, and now that commercial tests are being done, they've expanded the criteria for testing to include those with respiratory issues. But also, if you have a known contact with somebody that's been a confirmed, SARS-2 contact with an individual in the community, because now it's being spread in certain communities. So the testing parameters have changed, and they're going to continue to change to the point where in certain communities like Seattle, they're testing anyone. Anyone that would like to get tested can get tested. That hasn't happened here because right now that transmission hasn't occurred. But it's possible in any community depending on how many cases they're seeing.
Can you also just recommend where people should go for up-to-date news, if you have recommendations for where people should go for
Regarding
that?
testing?
People want to find out what the latest test results are in New Jersey.
New Jersey Department of Health is doing a pretty good job of updating their website with regards to current cases or testing. They're updating that, I believe, at least daily at this point.
Yeah. So I was at a gathering yesterday where somebody mentioned that they went to Small World and were told they couldn't use their own reusable mug and that it was an order from the health department. So I don't know if you want to comment on that and whether there are lots. I don't want you to go through in detail all the things that you're suggesting to local businesses or to residents, but where can we, if people are interested in getting into the weeds and knowing all the details, where they would go to find that information?
Sure. Yeah, that was a great question from one of our business leaders in the community. Had asked whether or not that could pose any hygienic issues. I said yes, not just for this illness, but really any other one. So I said in their best practices, it would be a good idea to kind of avoid doing that.
So that wasn't specifically related to
It was
the
more of just
concern around.
it was a matter of collaboration. This issue kind of brought us all together to discuss different illnesses and transmission, and that came up, and I advised.
But Jeff,
But it's not a
You haven't made
directive.
an outright ban.
On reusable cups?
On reusable cups.
I would never would do that. No, not in this circumstance. That circumstance was a little bit more of, they had some internal concerns, and I suggested it was a good idea to do that.
Okay.
Thank you, really, for all this information and for all the hard work you've done so far and for all the hard work you will be doing over the upcoming days and months. I think the council and hopefully the community shares have incredible confidence in you and really appreciate that. All right, and a couple of questions. So first, if you don't mind just walking through, like I wake up one morning and I have a cough and I think I have a fever. What should I do? What are the steps? Because I know some people might decide to go to the emergency room. Maybe not the best idea. So if you could just walk through the basic steps, and then I have just another question.
And I'll tie this also to some of the questions that have been, it's kind of a common question, where do I get the best information? So one of the other things that came out at this press conference that started about 6:30 was that apparently later tonight or early tomorrow morning, in essentially card form, there'll be a card for families and individuals, a card for businesses, a card for governments, a card for schools. I haven't seen them, but I'm going to make a presumption that these are effective cards. And so instead of expecting the citizens to read, the documents that I read, which I've got to tell you are hard enough for me to read, partially because they change so quickly that I'm sitting there reading through page after page on my website, on my web reader, and trying to read between the lines sometimes. It looks like by this time tomorrow we'll have handouts in common language for at least those four groups: community organizations, businesses separately, schools separately, and then individuals. And under the hope that those are effective, potentially one of those, well, what I don't know is whether they'll have this. I know that there are plenty of documents on the cdc.gov site that speak to the specific issue you have. They also speak to, you're the sender, you're sending either yourself or one of your relatives. You go, listen, I ought to send my mother, or I ought to send myself. The way it's supposed to work is that you call, they get ready for your arrival. They tell you things. If the alarm bells go off in their head, and the alarm bells are surrounding three particular symptoms: fever, cough, shortness of breath. If you say the magic triad, it should go off in their head, oh, this is a potential COVID-19 case. They will tell you something, and then the CDC gives a list of possibilities. If you have a room in your clinic that you can put somebody in, you can have somebody meet them at the door. You can put them in that room. If you don't have the room, they can sit in the car if they're capable of sitting in the car until you're ready to bring them in. They say the same thing about pediatric offices. If you have a place to separate the child. So they have an excruciating number of details on the CDC site about that issue, and then describing to both emergency rooms and to individual clinics, like, let's say, the Princeton Medical Group, on what to do if somebody is incoming. Do I know, and I'm not sure Jeff does, we've got enough going on, we're making something of a presumption that our clinical colleagues are keeping up with all this stuff. I believe they are, but that doesn't automatically mean that a particular clinician or a particular clinic is right on that cutting edge of being ready to receive as you make that phone call. I know PFARS is ready to transfer you because Jeff has been meeting with them and I've been talking with them. And Jeff, you might want to pick up on that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just regarding the healthcare providers. Anytime you introduce a new disease, there's a lot of planning that goes into it with new protocols and procedures. Their infectious disease doctors, their emergency doctors are learning not on the job, but they are getting guidance in the morning and then they're practicing during the day. To your point, with regards to concerns and what you would do, Dr. DiFernando mentioned it, call ahead. Your symptoms are going to tell them a story. Depending on if you know you were exposed to somebody that was diagnosed, and or travel history would be the next two questions they might ask you. If the symptoms were severe enough, you don't have to have those other two criteria. They would go ahead and they would test you. Now the commercial testing is available. Individuals are being tested if they meet some of those criteria more rapidly, but not everybody, if they have mild symptoms, is going to be tested.
Yeah, if you were to call and say, I feel fine, but I'm worried, I'd like a test, you're not going to the front of the line right now. The people at the front of the line are the people who are contacts, the people who have a constellation of symptoms, whether they're contacts or not, and then the worried well, and I respect the worried well wanting to be tested, but they're not going to be at the front of the line. But one other fact I can give you is that I was not able to attend this, but I know that the Princeton Medical Center had an all-hands meeting this morning at 9 a.m. to bring the entire organization up to speed on the issues that we're describing. I wasn't there, so I can't speak to the content, but I know both Meredith Avalos, who is a physician on our board, as well as Rhonda Patel, who just cycled off the board, were both part of that group, as are other physicians and physician assistants and nurses in the community. So that will raise the physician awareness and the health provider, nurse awareness of this issue to a much higher level, and there'll be a lot more partners that have the information right at their fingertips.
Thank you. That was very helpful. I just want to be sure that, people in the community know what to do, and I don't think very many people are going to go to the CDC website, so I think, unfortunately, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that information is on our website, and hopefully that will be people's first stop.
And I can tell you firsthand, there's a number of residents that know they should call the health department because we fielded many calls today regarding just that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And my second question, and I think you indicated that is no longer the case, but what I've been reading and what I've heard from people at the hospital is that the hospital themselves didn't have tests that the Board of Health had to be called to give the test, and then we've heard this term presumptive positive with the CDC having to verify the diagnosis. And is that still the case, or does the hospital now have kits that they can administer, make a diagnosis, or are we still in this everything has to be verified by the CDC, which seems like a tremendous I understand
I say this, it's better today, it's not perfect today. When I met my physician for a routine visit on Tuesday, she told me a story of an infectious disease physician at the hospital making multiple phone calls and spending 45 minutes of his time to get approval, to get a test. I think that was when we were trying to contain, and we were using scarce test kits around people that had direct contact. And so I'm not saying it was the right thing to do, but that was the strategy at that point. And this particular physician ran into that strategy and couldn't get. And so the state put Jeff and other health officers in a position of being the gatekeepers, even though, what do you call it? They had the responsibility, but they didn't have the authority. They were responsible for being the gatekeepers, but they couldn't make an exception. They say, okay, yeah, it's my job. No, I can't release the kit to you because the state made a regulation, and since the CDC was providing the test kits, that ran downhill. CDC said who could be tested. They sent them to the state. They gave Jeff and other health officers the responsibility but not the authority. And so when that physician last week got through to their health officer they were supposed to talk to, the person said, "Thank you for calling me. You can't have a test kit." That situation has changed, but there's still that situation that is going to frustrate some people. Well, why can't I get a test? Why? And that's because now there's still a type of hierarchy going on. Have you been exposed? Have you been in a country? Have you been exposed to a person with disease? Have you even been exposed to a person with infection? Or do you have that at least two of that triad? They really talk about if you have shortness of breath, that's a sign that you're actually pretty sick. So the idea is fever and cough. Those people should be, if they've been in a community that is presumed to have SARS-2 spreading, fever and cough should be enough to get you a test today.
Okay. Thank you. I want to thank both of you for that thorough report and just let everybody know that this is a changing situation. So we do have a special tab on the website, princetonnj.gov. On that tab, you can get direct links to the CDC and to the New Jersey State Health Department, and we'll be updating that frequently to give you local information if anything here changes on the ground. And I hope you can tell by this presentation we're taking this very seriously. We're working with all of our community partners and working on helping them with planning and helping individuals with planning too. So thank you very much. Okay. And I'll start on my right again with council reports. Ms. Byrne-Lambros, any reports?
Yeah, I have a couple. So the fueling station task force met and determined that the first phase of the beautification of what we call the Gateway Project will be the removal of the canopy, building a wall around 3 sides that will hide it with stucco, and then putting lighting on the side and also on the top. We're going to consider that this evening. And then further improvements will be considered next by the task force, which could include planting, screening, and other beautification considerations. And I'd just also like to update that the Economic Development Committee did a study and a comparison of different municipality websites and put together a really nice presentation. And it was very serendipitous because the IT committee and staff is looking at updating and our website. So that presentation was then used with the IT committee, and they're looking at various options and also GIS solutions. So that's being explored, and proposals are going to be brought back to the committee again. That's just my report.
No reports.
I'll be quick. So last Thursday and Friday of last week, I joined Sustainable Princeton to attend the Pew Foundation's convening on climate change and its impact on health. Sustainable Princeton was a recipient of a grant for a project grant to address health and the risk posed by climate change. It was joined by 3 other beneficiaries of the grant, and it was very, very informational. I would even go as far as saying that some of the things, what other cities are working on. Well, first of all, Princeton made us proud. Sustainable Princeton made us very proud with their presentation, and what I picked up from what other communities have been working on. I was already making notes because I see how it could also be applied to addressing other emergencies. I mean, I would even include the census, the upcoming census, how we reach our vulnerable populations, how we address their needs. So it was very informative, and then we also spent one day on the Hill talking to staff, legislative staff, talking about the work that Sustainable Princeton is doing, but also putting in a few words on some of our other needs. And it was very informative, but hopefully I know most of what we heard was that they were limited on what they could do because of the current administration and a lack of the access to certain funding. But so then I asked them what they'll be prepared to do on day one when the administration changes, and so hopefully they give them some food for thought.
No reports.
This is just a partial report, but in the PTAC, the Transportation Committee, we've been looking at what to do with the freebie bus, which is an ongoing source of, well, we've had issues with maintenance, and also it doesn't, we'd like to expand the routes, so we've been looking at possible options, and of course looking ultimately at more sustainable solutions. So tomorrow morning we will be meeting at 8:30 in Monument Hall to go over all the research that various ones of us in the committee have done thus far, and I'll be giving a much more comprehensive report probably at the next meeting, if not soon. So,
great, thanks. I just had a couple reports. Did you want to mention about the 2020 census, that the things, people are going to get things this week, right?
Well, you know, and I should be ashamed of myself because I said that every time that there's just a group of people, I will talk about the census, which I even did with our legislative staff, and I did at the convening that was on climate change and talking about the census and the importance of ensuring that we get maximum participation and what it means for our community. Starting next week, residents will start receiving postcards inviting them to register for the census online. This is the first time that individuals will be able to participate online. They'll also have the option of responding to the census by phone, or if they prefer, also the mail-in survey. Our Complete Count Committee has been working on developing outreach and working with community partners, including the school, the university, and many of our nonprofits that serve the historically undercounted populations that we're trying to reach, including LALDEF too is also doing great work. We hopefully you'll start if you haven't seen already, there's there's a lot of signage around reminding folks that this is letting folks know that this is coming, but certainly from now until July, we'll continue with the messaging to remind folks about the importance of participating in the census.
Great, thank you. Just a couple reports. One is Mercer County does Princeton's recycling, and you may have noticed that either your recycling didn't get picked up or your neighbor's recycling didn't get picked up, and there might have been a red tag in it. They are finally enforcing the recycling rules, and those rules include the following. Your recycling must be in an official Mercer County recycling bucket, or it will not be picked up. So even if you have perfect recycling and it's in a different kind of bucket, they will leave it on the curb. You also can't put any of your recycling in a plastic bag. Plastic bag means a plastic trash bag. A plastic bag means a McCaffrey's shopping bag. A plastic bag means the bag that your newspapers come in. So if they see a plastic bag in your recycling bucket, they will not pick it up. And also if you put styrofoam in your recycling bucket, they will not pick it up. These things seem like basic, but it bears repeating because there are a lot of buckets that are not getting picked up. And if you can help also be an ambassador to help spread the news about those rules. And we are trying to support the county in this effort of trying to have a cleaner recycling stream because it's very important both for our budget, for our environment, and also for the future of recycling in our country.
Can I ask for clarification? You mentioned things that have to go in the bucket. But when residents have many boxes that are broken, cardboard boxes that are broken down and are not in the bucket, will they still be picked up?
My sense is that if you have like a neatly stacked thing of cardboard boxes, they will be picked up. But I think the idea is that if you have a bucket out that's not an official recycling bucket, they're going to assume it's not recycling. Okay, and then the other, just picking up on the prior conversation with coronavirus, part of our internal planning is thinking about what happens to council meetings, what happens to our other meetings if we end up in a situation where we're supposed to be socially distancing ourselves. And so I've asked administration to just review the technology we have, and I'd also just ask Trishka too if there's any issues. I don't think there are with people calling in if they don't feel well, council members calling in to a meeting so they can still participate. I know we've talked about having fancier technology, so I assume that's fine.
It is, yes. Okay. And this is actually, these are questions that have been circulating, among all the local government attorneys, and the advice that Bill Kearns and I have been giving is it's perfectly fine for everyone to participate by phone. Somebody's got to be in the room. If there's public in attendance, they have to be able to hear everybody. But as you know from what I've told you, Sunshine Law meeting can be by electronic means, it can be by telephonic means. And I think this is definitely one instance where that would be more than acceptable.
Right. So we want to make sure we have a robust system so if people aren't feeling well, they will stay at home and call in to participate. And we're also exploring to make sure we have a good system. So if members of the public care about an issue, we definitely do not want you coming to a meeting if you don't feel well, but we don't want to prohibit you from participating. So, we'll be working to make sure, maybe we have a relaxation of the rules we normally require and allow people to call into a meeting or send an email and have that email read, and to just make sure people are able to participate while keeping everybody healthy. So we'll be developing those plans and we'll put them in place as necessary. And are there any staff reports?
I have just one report. I've been getting a lot of questions about Alexander Street Bridge construction and whether or not it's on time. And I checked in with both the state as well as the county engineers that are responsible for the projects. And both are confirming currently that the projects will be completed on time and the road will reopen on April 20th. So I hope that puts everybody's
You should say that with a smile.
Well, you never know. Engineering and road construction, things can always pop up. But at this current moment, everything is on time.
All right, well, that's excellent news.
Liz, I actually have one more report. I know a lot of people have questions about the affordable housing. So this year we have a new communications task force subcommittee, which is Councilwoman Lambrose and Mayor Lempert and myself. And we've been working on putting together updated information on the website about all the various aspects of the affordable housing process. And so there'll be FAQs and updated links, and if people have specific questions that they want to send our way that we can include, feel free. But that will be coming very soon. So,
thank you. Okay, if there's no more reports, then we'll move on to our public hearings for this evening. The first one is Ordinance 2020-9, an ordinance approving application for a long-term tax exemption and authorizing the execution of a financial agreement with Princeton Thanet Road Urban Renewal LLC, Avalon Bay. I'd like to, if there's, first just ask council if there are any questions or comments about this ordinance before we open up the public hearing. And if not, I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance. Would anybody like to speak to it? Okay. All right. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to council and see if there's any final comments on this, or if there's a motion to approve, or if there's just silence.
I will move it.
Okay, it's moved by Ms. Fraga. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Cohen. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perone Lambros,
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang.
No.
What did you say?
No.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Fraga,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Sachs.
Yes.
Okay, the ordinance passes by a vote of 5-1. Next is ordinance 2020-10, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating the keeping of backyard chickens on residential property and amending the code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. And again, I'd like to ask if there are any comments or questions from council before we open up the public hearing. And seeing none, I will open up the public hearing on this ordinance. Is there anybody who'd like to speak to this? I know there were some comments when we did the introduction, but you're welcome to come speak again.
Hi, my name's Karen Zembel, and I'm just going to thank you in advance. And I look forward to legally owning my chickens in Princeton. Thank you.
And thank
And
you, Karen, for all the work.
Yes, I just want to also say to Karen, to Jenny, to members of the Environmental Commission, to our health officer who has left but who put a lot of time and energy into this. You've come back just in time for me to thank you. Chickens, Jeff, chickens. And to our animal control officer as well. So it really was the work of many hands. So thank you for seeing this through. I'm thrilled to have this in front of us. And if I can, I would love to be the one to introduce this ordinance.
Okay.
Or not introduce, to move this
Right.
ordinance.
If there's, I just want to make sure there's nobody else who wants to speak to it, then it's been moved by Ms. Niedergang. And is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Sachs. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perone Lambros,
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Fraga,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Sachs.
Yes.
And this ordinance passes unanimously. And congratulations. If you're interested in having chickens in your backyard, hopefully the Princeton Environmental Commission can help us with getting some information, helpful information up on the website, so people can be safe when they do it and be good stewards of their animals. Great. Perfect. All right. Thank you.
For the sake of the public, Mayor, do you want to repeat what was?
I didn't really hear exactly what you said, but I interpreting what you said as somebody's working on that, and you'll get us the information to put up online. Oh, a class. Okay, perfect. Great. All right, perfect. Well, I guess if you can, you're the PEC rep, right? So maybe if you can make sure that Ms. Niedergang's aware of that, and she can help make sure that we have the proper information to get out, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, the last ordinance public hearing tonight is ordinance 2020-11, an ordinance amending Chapter 34 of the Code of the Municipality of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, concerning sewer connection fees. And are there any questions from council on this? All right. I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance. And seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to council. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Fraga,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Sachs.
Yes.
Okay, the ordinance passes unanimously, and next we come to resolutions, and we'll start with 2115, resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement for payment in lieu of taxes pursuant to NJSA 5514K-1 with Princeton LIHTC Urban Renewal LLC concerning property identified as a portion of Block 5502, Lot 4 on the municipality's tax map. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Fraga. Are there any comments or questions on this resolution?
No, I'll just mention that I had my questions answered from our attorney, Kevin McManaman, that 6.28 is a standard, type for this type of pilot. And also this pilot is different in that we'll be getting the pilot revenue based on net after expenses, not the gross revenue as it will be for Avalon, just to clarify.
Right, and just to clarify, sorry, that this concerns the 100% senior development, the 80 unit senior development on the Thanet property.
And I wanted to clarify, it's actually just net of utilities. Other operating expenses will be included in the basis for the pilot.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions on this resolution? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the resolution passes unanimously. And yeah, thank you very much. All right, have a good night. I would like to see if there's a motion to, well, I'm not seeing it here now. Help me with where the resolution is for the canopy here so we can move it up, because I know there's a lot of people here for it.
Number 8.
Okay, 2122. Thank you. All right, so is there a motion to amend the agenda to take up 2122 next?
I'll move.
Moved by Ms. Fraga.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Williamson. All in favor of amending the agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So next we'll take up 2122, resolution authorizing use of state contract A42270T0849 with Independence Constructors in the not to exceed amount of $61,227 for removal of the fuel facility canopy, lighting installation, masonry wall construction, and other associated work. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. So moved by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Lambros. Are there any questions or comments on this?
I would just like to make a comment. I understand that this compromise has been a long time in the making. However, I'm sorry that we couldn't have come up with some kind of compromise that would protect our employees who are using the fueling station from the elements, because I'm just unhappy about that, and I just wanted to voice my my concern about that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we looked at various ways to screen it. It's very high. And, there's going to be a second phase, as I mentioned in my report. So it's not to say that there couldn't be something down the road. It's really kind of a compromise, as you say. But putting tall enough trees and enough evergreens to cover it all around was pretty impossible. So we did try, and I agree. I would like to have it both ways. So anyway, thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to make a comment or have a question about this? Is there anybody who'd like to speak from the public on it before we bring it back to council? Okay, so I'd like to take a vote on this ordinance, and then there's there was a second part of the memo that I'd also like to discuss too, but first let's vote on this piece of the ordinance so we're not confusing the two. And then, yeah, Ms. Stockton? Resolution. Sorry. Thank you. I've had a really, it doesn't feel like Monday to me. It's been, okay. So is there, it's been moved and seconded, so all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes unanimously, and I'd like to ask Ms. Stockton if you can walk us through the second part of your memo, and the next phase of this project involves the landscaping and the I think there was a desire to bring some of those questions to council before the subcommittee took the next steps, because it will require a significant expenditure of the money, and making sure that there's a comfort level in moving forward in this direction, or if there's concerns and we might want to consider a different path before we spend more time. So if Ms. Stockton, if you can sort of walk us through what's considered for this phase 2, and we can have a little bit of a discussion here and see if we're ready to give some direction or not.
So we've been meeting with the subcommittee of the Site Plan Review Advisory Board, and there is a recommendation that's come forth from the committee to relocate the rain garden that is currently located between the fuel station and Mount Lucas Road. The goal of removing the rain garden from this area, and I have to be clear, it's remove the rain garden and relocate it, or find a way to have a different stormwater management facility in that location that allows the ground level to be higher. The rain garden creates a very recessed ditch area between the sidewalk and the fuel station, and the concern is that plant material does not have an opportunity to be tall enough to properly hide the fuel station. So the idea is finding an opportunity to raise the ground level. Like I said, one option is to replace the rain garden with perhaps an underground system. Another option is to move the rain garden from its current location into an area closer to PFAR's parking lot and US Route 206. The property between 206 and the fuel station is currently encumbered with conservation easements with DEP and the Delaware and Raritan Canal Commission, because it is considered to be part of a riparian zone for the stream that is across the highway from this site. So any modification in that area, whether it be for the rain garden or for some additional landscape screening that's being considered on that side of the site, would require coordination with DEP. So we've put together a cost estimate with the help of an engineering consultant for what these costs might be, because it would also require a modification of our license agreement that we have with PFARS. So the cost figures that I've put in place here are $124,000, and that's really just to get us to the point of having a new plan that can be approved by DEP. It doesn't mean that it is anything that is constructed. And obviously, we wouldn't look to expend all of this money at once. We would take an incremental approach. And the first step would really be to meet with DEP with an engineering consultant who is really familiar with the rules and regulations for this area, to determine, kind of do a benefit cost analysis of moving forward with any modifications. But because of all of the permits and the deed conservation on the property, we need to make sure that we're taking that first step with DEP. And so that's pretty much what I've laid out in here. I don't know if there's any more questions that I can help answer to clarify what's proposed in that next phase.
Well, I have an alternate plan that I talked to our arborist Taylor about, which would be $12,000, which would be to keep the rain garden where it is and do a planting. And he has a whole planting scope of work here that he said he submitted, but I think this is before my time, and maybe, I don't know, 6 months ago or whenever it was. So in other words, we could save the $124,000, maybe do some other beautification things, because we still will have a screening on the other side of the driveway to cover, so you don't see the fueling station. And he has a planting thing. So I thought the next phase would really be to discuss the various options. I know that's one option, and I also hear that it might be really difficult to get the Department of Environmental Protection to agree. I don't know if that's even, we might spend a lot of money and not be able to even be able to move the rain garden. But, I don't even know that we want to go down that road if we could spend $12,000 and keep the rain garden and shield and make it protected against, anybody falling in. I mean, clearly it's on one side of the sidewalk, so we have to figure out the safety issue. So.
Yeah, so I have a question, which is, out of that $125,000, if you have any sense for how much of that would need to be expended before having that preliminary meeting with DEP, because I think the engineers would need to do some kind of feasibility work but before we would be ready to go to DEP to even sort of say, would you consider this? Would you agree with that? And do you have some kind of sense for what that nut would be?
I would look to put in place probably $30,000 and not to exceed $30,000 with a clear scope of pre-application meeting with DEP and Delaware Raritan Canal Commission with some, I would say, rudimentary calculations to determine the feasibility of options before we go to that pre-application meeting. Mm-hmm. That would be what I suggest right off the bat.
Uh-huh.
Can I ask a question? Is the rationale behind moving the rain garden, it's aesthetic, it's for enhanced stormwater management? What is the rationale? I know that there's a task force that's been meeting, but I'm only just hearing that the rain garden, the idea of moving it, but I haven't heard what the underlying rationale is.
Louisa, I think I'll defer to you on that.
Okay. So, is this on? Okay. So I want to thank you for passing this resolution. I really appreciate that. I think a lot of people put a lot of time and effort into coming up with a plan that will work for the neighbors, for the neighborhood, for the town, for the gateway concept of this location, and also making do with the situation that we've been given. So I really appreciate you passing that beginnings of this. I did want to get up here and just say that it's not aesthetics. I mean, it is to a certain extent, but I think the biggest problem with having that rain garden where it is that you've got an extremely busy road, Mount Lucas. You're asking people now to walk on the sidewalk, and yet there's a 4-foot ditch immediately on the other side of the sidewalk of the rain garden that actually requires a fence. It doesn't matter what Taylor wants to plant in there. As long as it's a ditch, you have to put a fence up. So suddenly you've got a really busy road on one side. You've got a 4-foot sidewalk, not an 8-foot sidewalk, a 4-foot sidewalk. And then you have a fence right up against you. So it really does not make for a very comfortable situation when you're trying to navigate that. So I think that's really the main part of it. And then the screening, of course, is another part of it. But it's also for safety of pedestrians and bikers coming along that part of the sidewalk.
No, I agree with you, Louisa. The idea that I understood was that it would have tall arborvitaes, something screening in the back, in the deep part, but in the front part would be something like shrubbery, something that would definitely block it off. I mean, clearly safety would come first in consideration, but he felt that his screening program, the planting program, could address that. And I think it's something, we should take back. I mean, that's why I said, back to the subcommittee and really talk it through and make sure, because I wouldn't advocate for it if it wasn't going to be something safe.
But I don't believe that any planting would actually be protective enough. I believe that, Deanna, a fence would absolutely be required regardless of what plants go in there because the changing grade.
And what would be the cost of the fence?
It's, we haven't calculated it. It's not an extensive length of area, so it's less than $10,000, I would think. And just for clarification, the sidewalk is 6 feet wide, and we do have a buffer between the curb and the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, I just want to comment that, I'm not an expert on landscape, but I'm skeptical. I've never heard of arborvitae as a plant for location at the bottom of a rain garden. This is going to be a frequently wet location, and I'm not sure that that's a plant that's really suitable for that purpose. And so I think we need to get more expert advice on whether that's really a realistic solution if we decided to keep the rain garden there.
I might have misspoken. It might not be arborvitae. He has a whole list of shrubs here.
No, it was arborvitae because he wanted something to screen the wall, and that's essentially the only plant that's tall enough, to do that. But
I'll share it with you.
Ms. Niedergang?
Thank you. I have a few concerns here. First, I assume that the rain garden was sited at this particular spot because this was the best spot for the rain garden to be at. And on the other side, as Ms. Stockton said, we have the riparian zone. It's not clear that it's movable. I'd like to see a consult with somebody who is really an expert in rain gardens and their function to see, can you actually plant put plants such as are being envisioned in a rain garden? And secondly, is there really another possible site, before we get in engineers or expend a lot of money? Because I'm frankly very concerned about opening things up with DEP. It could lead to a very long delay in getting anything done. It could raise other issues that at this point we're unaware of. We have a deal, we have something that they signed off on that we think will work to adequately filter the water and handle the water overflow, and I'm just anxious about opening that up again, and also anxious about tinkering with what's in the rain garden without some expert input. And finally, this is frankly, I just read this over for the first time today, considerably more money than was originally presented to us. I know that the first part came in well under budget, and that's fabulous, but I was kind of thinking of $125,000 as being the budget for everything aside from possibly building another fuel tank at River Road. So now we're talking about $125,000 as just kind of the starting costs for a project. And again, I think we'd have to really think about what our town-wide priorities are before, I feel, before committing this sum to this one project, which is, again, as I said, until reading this over today, I had no idea that we were going beyond that original sum.
Mr. Cohen?
I would suggest that the civil engineer is actually the expert in rain gardens that you're asking for. And that's exactly what we're budgeting this initial study money for, is for them to take a serious look. And by the way, I think that the rain garden is located where it is right now because it's the easiest place for the rain garden, not necessarily the best place for the rain garden. And so I think we're asking them, and by the way, and maybe a rain garden isn't the right solution, and maybe it's the underground storage, given the other considerations around here. I do think, I really agree with Louisa that a big part of what we're trying to do here is improve the pedestrian experience. It's not just a visual beautification of the fueling station, but a realization that people who walk by here are going to feel caught between traffic and a pit. Whether it's a 4 or a 6 foot sidewalk, it's still going to feel constricted. And so there's no doubt in my mind that aesthetically and experientially, it's going to create a better experience if we can eliminate the rain garden in one way or the other. Now, it may turn out that it costs too much. It may turn out that it's technically infeasible. I am not saying, I'm not laying down a gauntlet and saying we have to move the rain garden. What I'm saying is that it deserves some more study, because the solution is a better one if we're able to do it. And let's find out a little bit more about what it's going to cost and whether it's feasible before we shut down the...
But you're saying even asking this question costs us $30,000. That's not...
Actually, Deanna said $30,000.
Well, I understand. You asked Deanna. She gave you the
said
information.
it right. I said it will cost something.
So, and my question is, to your point, that I understand we're trying to improve the pedestrian experience here because it's crowded, and I appreciate the effort that has gone into trying to create a positive pedestrian experience here, but there are so many other neighborhoods throughout our town in which I hear all the time from people who feel that their pedestrian experience is crowded, not to mention all the bikers who feel that their bike experience is crowded. And I just think that we ought to come up with some sort of comprehensive, fair rationale for all the spots in town where pedestrians and bicyclists feel crowded and feel that their experience is suboptimal. And I'm wondering, how do we spend a couple $100,000 to improve the pedestrian experience on this one corner? How do we then say no to all the other people who come to council in other parts of town and say, but our project is just as deserving? I'm asking for an answer.
I just had a question about the $35,000 for the civil engineer, and what I'm hearing from council is, I think, is that I think we want to have a little bit more information before deciding which direction to go, and that seems like a big chunk of money to spend before making that decision. And is there a way to get a little bit more information about just the feasibility of moving it? Because without doing the full design and bringing it back, and I think the questions that we'd want answered on this first round would be the feasibility, and that comes with like a rough budget of what we'd be looking at to move it in total. So it would be not just getting the permitting for it, but actually moving it and planting it and, having it be done ballpark. And And then also, and I'm not sure if this is the same person or not, but, you know, if we were to try to plant it and put something tall down there, like what really would our options be for something that would grow in a healthy manner there? You know, or if there are other options of, you know, creating a higher surface or more of a lip. I mean, I think we want to have like a menu of options and their feasibility. And is there a way to get that and not have to pay $35,000 up front, even if, just like your initial estimates here, were not perfect estimates, but they were, I would say, in the ballpark enough for us to have made a decision to move forward. Because I think we're being asked to spend a significant amount of money. I think that the reluctance from some of my colleagues up here, it's a significant amount of money down a path that we're not sure is feasible. And so I think we really want to have a sense of like, is this feasible before we start going down this road? And I don't know if the maybe it is $35,000 that we need to spend.
And also, does it enhance the functionality of the stormwater management on the site? Because I also am I'm concerned about, does it enhance it or does it diminish the capacity to move it? And I'm also interested to know, I do have residual concerns from an environmental standpoint about whether the rain garden can handle, whether it's, I'm obviously a strong proponent of green infrastructure, but I think that we should explore the possibility of having an underground system there, and whether that's a safer option. And I'm wondering, is that something that would be part of this study?
That would be one of the options, the menu of options that we would create for council to review.
Okay.
And I just want to chime in too that whatever we decide as far as the rain garden and the spend there's still additional things we want to do. I mean, I do believe, like David said, I mean, it is kind of the gateway. I like the idea that this is the gateway project. We're still going to have the problem of the visual on the 206 side is still wide open. So we have to do planting and some other type of screening, some fence, which we also have to go to DEP for. So we're talking more than just the money to move the rain garden. So.
Hi, I wanted to address the comment about sidewalks and whether if we spend money on a sidewalk here, are we taking away from sidewalks in other parts of town? I don't have control of the budget, but I can certainly tell you that as a chair of the Princeton Bicycle Advisory Committee with responsibility also for pedestrian matters, that we are concerned about the pedestrian safety of all of our residents, of all neighborhoods, and we're doing our utmost to find ways to cover the entire town with safer walking and safer biking. And I'd like you to remember that in the plan of what you're looking at, the original master plan as written in the bike mobility plan was for an 8-foot side path here, where it's now 6 foot. Actually, it was an 8-10 constraint, but it got whittled down to 6 because of other activities like the rain garden that squeezed it down. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the next steps would be bringing a proposal to council to help us figure out how many of these options we want to further explore. And I'm not sure if that $35,000 was just a ballpark figure that you were estimating or something based on a conversation you had with somebody who would possibly be doing this work for us. But just so that council knows what to expect, so we don't have sticker shock when it comes back. Do you think the feasibility study we're talking about, the sort of initial option study, is that $35,000 something we should be expecting, or is there a way to do a sort of a part A of this that would be less of a financial commitment?
I would hope 35,000 is the maximum. I'm looking at the tasks and the estimated costs that I included in the memo, and if I can pull pieces out of those numbers, that's where I said the 35,000, because it would be a little bit of the permitting piece, it'll be a little bit of the civil design, and those combined are 70,000. So, but plus we need to do some survey, but I can hopefully do that in-house. So that's how I came up with a figure. I did not touch base with the consultant. But
By the way, you started out saying 30. I don't know how it got up to 35.
that's true.
I'm
I
going to
did
make you
say
stick
30.
to the 30.
Thank you. Yes, 30 was what I was thinking, and then I think the mayor moved it to 35.
Well, that's what it says here.
I
so-
apologize.
I think that's what it says on my copy. Maybe I got the deluxe version.
Can I just ask another
Yeah.
question? In your experience, Dana, dealing with DEP, what is the likelihood of success here? If you want to go out on a limb, I'm not asking you to predict the future, but is there a 90% chance of success or a 10% chance of success, or if you want to pass, that's fine.
I'll pass. I'll call a friend.
Well, it would be useful if what we're paying for comes back with useful information, because we're going to go down one of these avenues. And so, either the rain garden is going to stay in place and we're going to do the best we can with it there, or we're going to try to move it. And just having some guidance of what each of those decision points would look like, I think would be really helpful to council in deciding on next steps, and I think would also be useful to the subcommittee too in thinking about what the realistic options are.
And could I also just ask, just so I'm clear, so the issue with the fence, and to your point, Lisa, is the fence is that you don't think it can adequately protect pedestrians from falling into, is it a safety issue or it's an aesthetics issue, or both for the fence?
Well, just picture this. You're coming down a 6 foot sidewalk, either walking with somebody next to you, you're riding on your bike, and you've got right here, to prevent you from falling into the rain garden, you have a 4 foot fence. And then you have a 2 foot verge, and then you have cars zipping by, or you have school buses standing like this, waiting to turn left into the fueling station to fuel. It's a very uncomfortable situation. There's no space.
Okay.
So the fence is simply, it's like you just get squeezed.
And if the fence is moved, then...
Well, you can't, if you have a pit, you have to have a fence.
Okay.
You can plant also, but regardless, if you have a pit, you have to have a fence. Just like if you have a pool, you have to have a fence.
So if the rain garden was moved, would the plan be to widen the side path to being...
So I think that at the very least, if the grade is at this piece of land between the fueling station and the sidewalk, if that grade is the same level as the sidewalk, you don't need a fence. You have a little bit more breathing room. And you can plant that area so you can help to screen the fueling tank, but you don't feel like there's a hard barrier that you're going to like bump your elbow into, or you're going to get pushed into, or you're going to fall into your bike into, that you could there's space.
I mean, people walking on sidewalks, when a bicycle comes along, step off the sidewalk all the time. If the fence is there, you don't have that option. If the fence isn't there, you can, I mean, it's
No, I understand what you're
partly
saying, but
aesthetic, right?
I can think of 50 other places in Princeton, which, we have a similar situation.
This
So-
is
and
a
I'm-
high traffic area. I can't think of 50 other areas with this amount of pedestrian and other traffic. It's very close to schools, community park school in particular, but also a route for people going to the high school and the middle school. It's,
coming
you know,
here.
I think we're going around in circles a little bit. I think
I
that
think it's worth exploring.
Yeah, I just
it's-
wanted to try to understand, so are we then going to implement the bike master plan and do the broader, path and, that, I'm just trying to understand how much we would be getting in terms of changes if we paid for the study. That's what I'm trying
Well,
to
my
understand.
understanding too is part of the study is going to be giving us potentially additional guidance on the green infrastructure and what can be
Right, and planting options, if you
Mm-hmm.
can go underground with the stormwater management. We can look at landscape options there, or if we can't, are there other options for planting that, may meet the need or the condition with the wetter soils?
Is there no way to get someone from DEP to just come out and give us a read? Say,
No, I called DEP, I think, a week or two ago, and I have yet to hear back from them. They're not, they cover the entire state, so they are fairly challenged to get out on site.
we can try again there too.
they do have some other things they might want to be visiting Princeton for.
Okay, so do you have enough direction, Deanna, from council? Okay. And so you'll bring something back to us that we'll actually be voting on then for
Yes.
giving some money for this. Okay, all right,
And I'll
thank you.
touch base with subcommittee as well, just to make sure that we've covered all of the points on it.
Okay. And then just since it didn't come up, just to reiterate, especially for the neighbors who are here, the resolution that passed, that work is planned for spring break when the schools are out. So there will be a lot of activity there when that work is happening. And the one piece that I think is still being worked on is the alternative fueling spot, or has that been worked out?
I've been advised by Public Works that that's been worked out, and it will be located at the Franklin Avenue site over the parking
Oh,
lot.
okay.
Yes.
And then my other question is, if there happens to be bad weather that week, what is it just going to be like, we'll try to do it when school is out because it'll be the least disruptive, but if there's bad weather, then it might flow
may.
over into the next week?
It may have to shift. I mean, the other option is if everybody's willing, we can push it off to the summer, but I know a lot of people have been waiting for this to happen
Right.
since last year when the commitment was made, so I would just as soon keep it moving ahead.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Okay, so now we'll go back up to 2116, resolution approving an emergency temporary appropriations for the 2020 current fund budget, $14,734,100. Why don't we take all of these emergency temporary appropriations in a block? The next is 2117, resolution approving an emergency temporary appropriations for the 2020 Affordable Housing Fund budget of $130,000, and 2118, resolution approving an emergency temporary appropriations for 2020 Parking Fund budget of $475,000. Is there a motion to approve these in block?
Would it be possible to just get, I understand what this is, but would it be possible to just get a quick explanation for?
Yeah, why don't we put it on the floor and then we'll get an explanation.
Okay, great. So moved.
So it's moved by Ms. Niedergang.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Cohen. And Mr. DeShield, if you can just explain why we're doing these emergency temporary appropriations at this point.
Yes, sure, Mayor. Each year, as you know, we don't pass our budget probably until around April of each year. In order for the municipality to function, you have to pass a temporary budget. The initial temporary budget is done in December. And what happens if we need additional budget appropriations? Unfortunately, the state calls them emergency appropriations. They're simply adding money to the temporary budget to allow us to operate until our budget is passed.
Okay. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolutions passed unanimously. Next is 2119, resolution authorizing a professional services agreement with Clark Caton Hints in an amount not to exceed $75,000 for professional affordable housing planning services. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Sachs. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Williamson. All in favor?
Aye.
Wait,
Oh, sorry. Are there any comments or questions on
yes,
this?
I'm sorry. This seems like an extraordinary amount of money for what is going to happen in a really compressed period of time. And could someone just explain to me exactly
I'd be happy to explain that.
what
Since
they're doing?
That was
Well, why don't we, Mark, do you want to explain
Sure.
what this is?
That is one of the issues. Actually, it's going to be a very short, compressed time. We've got to do a number of ordinance. In addition to providing the services for the ordinance, one of the things they'll provide for us also is project management, which is going to be key in order to get all of these ordinances done and all of the documents that we need and ready for the court. Will be significant work, and that's why the cost is so high.
It's essentially, I mean, I did the math. It's like someone 30 hours a week or something like that. That's what needs to be done in order to get this through. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Let's just say that it's going to be much more expensive if we don't do what we need to do. And this is an amazing team that provides us with the professional scaffolding that I think it would have been helpful if we'd had before, but now we have it. And I'm so glad that we do.
That's great. I'm glad they're here then. Okay.
Okay, so one more time, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes unanimously. And next we have a couple resolutions that I wanted to, before we get to them, ask Mr. DeShield to give a report on the River Road cleanup, what these resolutions do, and where we are at this point.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'm just going to go through the resolution, and then I want to give council an update of where we are with River Road. First, for the resolution, you have before you tonight a resolution requesting a professional services agreement with an environmental attorney, John Scagnelli. He will provide legal services for us. What Mr. Scagnelli will be doing is ensuring that we take all the actions that we take moving forward will be in a manner that ensure that we'll be in compliance with NJDEP, that's New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, and ensure that those actions that we take will be in compliance to ensure that, one, we can recover money from our insurance policy. We have an insurance policy for environmental pollution, which covers us for about $1 million. We need to ensure that any actions that we take will be covered under that insurance. In addition, Mr. Scagnelli will also be providing us with ensuring that we're taking the steps necessary to give us the opportunity, if they avail themselves to us, to go after any contractors who actually dumped on the site. In addition to that, he will be assisting us in just working with NJDEP in the matters of the violation that we receive for operating a solid waste facility without a license. In addition, I want to just cover a couple of things. I know there's a recent article that indicated concerning the fine that we have with NJDEP. As council is aware, we briefed council earlier last year concerning where we are with NJDEP. Once we received the notice of violations, we had a meeting with NJDEP in which we went down to discuss the fine. At that point, after our discussion, that fine was held in abeyance. We will eventually have to pay that fine, but they are working with us, and we are working with NJDEP. So that fine is on hold. I suspect any time now that we will eventually have to pay that fine to NJDEP. In addition, as you know, last year we had Whitman Associates conduct the soil sampling on the River Road site. They conducted the soil analysis that was given to NJDEP. They finally issued a violation notice to the municipality, which indicated that we need to remove the materials that were dumped on the site. But it also indicated there may be occasions where we can relieve some of the materials there. But in order to do that, we need to do additional testing. So council will be receiving an additional proposal from Whitman Associates for additional testings. It will be extensive testing. We anticipate Whitman Associates will have to do over 300 samples, additional samples on the site. That should be coming to council, I'm hoping, at the next meeting or the meeting following. But before that comes to us, it's one of the things that the attorney will be working with us. We're working with our insurance carrier. They will have that proposal reviewed by their environmental engineering firm to ensure that it meets all the requirements. So once that's approved by the carrier, that will ensure us that we will receive reimbursement for the dollars that we expend. That will come before council for approval. I'm expecting that figure to be over $300,000 for that testing. But what that testing will do, it will allow us to go onto the site and to identify areas of concern. In doing that, we will know what needs to be removed from the site, what can remain on the site, and if there are engineering controls that will allow some of the materials to stay there. And with the help of the environmental attorney, what we'll attempt to do is to do it in the most cost-effective manner that also eliminates any environmental issues on the site.
Great. Are there any questions for Mr. Shield? Yeah,
Yeah,
Ms. Dietergen?
just to clarify, the $300,000 for the additional testing, that will likely be covered by our insurance?
Any proposal I bring back to council, it will have the approval of the insurance carrier prior to bringing it back to ensure that we get reimbursement for
Great.
it. So at this point, I believe I'm estimating it's about $300,000, but we have to get all the approvals, and then we'll present that to council.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Shield? Ms. Sachs?
Yeah, so I actually wanted to, Trishka, could you speak to, after the article in Plan of Princeton came out, I was asked are we fighting the DEP because people were concerned that we're hiring an attorney, and I think Mark just described very well what we're doing, but if you could just speak as an attorney to legally what the implications are, why we actually have an attorney.
Yeah, I wouldn't want members of the public to think that because you've retained an environmental attorney, that means that you're not adversarial to DEP in this situation. I've been recommending from the outset that you get an environmental attorney because these regulations are very detailed. It's sort of its own little area of the law, and I think having someone like Mr. Scagnelli on board is really, he's here to protect the municipality in terms, as Mr. DeShield described, positioning you properly vis-a-vis the insurance company to make sure that everything that's proposed is in fact going to be covered by insurance, working both with Whitman and with the DEP to come up with the most appropriate remediation plan. The fine is really the only issue out there, and I'll be candid, they've assessed Princeton the absolute barest minimum, and they've been very cooperative with Princeton. Princeton's been very cooperative with the DEP. It's definitely, I would characterize it as a collaborative process, but I think having someone like Mr. Scagnelli on board, he's really going to be positioned to make sure that the town is as protected as it can be going forward.
Which could also, and I think Mr. DeShield said this, but can you just confirm that would mean giving us the possibility to perhaps recoup some money back from some of the.
That would certainly be both my hope and my expectation, is that as he's working with all of these issues, that he is going to be alert to any opportunity to go after other responsible parties. And, as attorneys, we're not only looking for those opportunities, but we're also making sure then that we're having the client act in a way that kind of maximizes whatever opportunities are out there. So that to me is also a really important reason to have them on board.
Okay, great, thank you.
Great. Okay, so I wanted to take up this resolution, 2120, resolution authorizing a professional services agreement with Scarinci and Hollenbeck, LLC, and John M. Scagnelli, Esquire, in the amount not to exceed $50,000 for professional legal services, defense of NJDEP solid waste enforcement action 290-298 River Road. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Niedergang. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Cohen. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. And next is 2121, and can you explain this? This is separate
Yes.
and unrelated, but it's
wanna
also
make-
at River Road, so a little confusing.
Yes, I want to make sure this is clear. This proposal for a professional services contract with T&M is for the landfill site, which is a separate site from where the dumping occurred. The municipality has a landfill at the River Road site. This contract is to do the closure on the landfill, the engineering services to do the closure on the landfill. The landfill, we've been in the process of closing the landfill for some time. When we put in the new solar field on the landfill, it also created, it didn't allow us to completely close the landfill, plus there have been some issues in terms of making some repairs on the landfill before it can be closed, and we're making those repairs. Council will see in the capital budget, we have some money set aside to make some initial repairs on the landfill for some drainage issues that are on the landfill, and this will be the final actions which will actually allow us to officially close the landfill.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve? I'm sorry, I should read it. It's 2021, resolution authorizing a supplemental professional services agreement in the not-to-exceed amount of $27,450 with T&M Associates for work related to the closure of the Princeton landfill on River Road.
So moved.
Second.
So it's been moved by Ms. Niedergang, seconded by Ms. Perron-Lambros. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is Resolution 20-123, resolution authorizing the purchase of a Zetron Max 911 call taking system, state contract A83924, in the amount of $175,103. Is there a motion to approve?
Could we just have a little brief explanation of what this is?
Sure. Yeah, I guess if we can get it on the table and then we'll get it.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Niedergang.
Second.
And is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Fraga. And then can we get an explanation of this resolution?
Absolutely. This is to upgrade, actually replace a obsolete system for our 911 telecommunication system. That system is actually original to the building. It has been part of our capital, I believe it was in our capital budget last year. We're now making those, it's now time to actually introduce the replacement of that system. And it's just that because it's obsolete over time.
And was there, how do we decide on this particular system? Was there?
It's actually a state contract and also reviewed through the police department's chief and his command staff.
Okay.
Okay. And any other questions on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2124, resolution to award the sale of surplus personal property, one used Brome 624 composter, conveyor mixer to Community Food Cycle LLC for the amount of $20,500. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Williamson. Are there any questions on this or Did you want to give a quick report on this, Mr. Shield?
As council is aware, earlier this year, there was a committee formed to evaluate our, let me back up a little bit. In August, we received the opportunity from MetLife to receive a composter from MetLife to process food waste. We accepted that composter. As part of that, accepting that composter, there was an opportunity to try to see if it could restart our food waste program. There was a subcommittee created to review those opportunities. The subcommittee came back, indicated that the best way to move forward would be to auction the equipment, hopefully getting it in the hands of a local food processor that would give us the opportunity in the future to possibly restart our program and to use that food waste processor as part of the program. That being the case, we had our auction. Food Cycle LLC actually came in as the highest bidder at $20,500. They are a local provider. So this, as we envision, will give us the opportunity in the future as we review our food waste program to have an opportunity for a local food waste processor.
And I just want to comment that I learned recently there's actually state legislation being considered right now requiring food service establishments to recycle their food waste. So I know there were some concerns that this might not be the most suitable for our curbside program, but there was some interest in it possibly serving our restaurants or other commercial establishments in town. And this state legislation increases the likelihood that there's going to be a use for it. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, and I know one of the concerns or suggestions that came up when we were discussing this earlier was trying to attack the problem higher up in the food chain. And thanks to actually Councilwoman Prone-Lambros, I learned about a new organization in town that is helping make the connection between restaurants and excess food and making sure it goes to people who need food in the community. And remind me what they're called again?
Share My Meals.
Share My Meals. Yeah. And I think they're pretty new. They started up in January or February this year, and so they're looking for volunteers, and it's a really great organization and something that I think is going to make a big difference with just, it's always better to catch it there instead of composting it. It's a better way, especially when we have excess food and people are hungry. So, okay. So back to the ordinance. It's been moved and seconded, and if there's no more comments or questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes unanimously, and I think that this goes back then to Public Works as part of their exploration of looking at our waste, and this will now be one of the options to review as we think about how to restart our compost program. Okay, the last resolution is 2125, resolution authorizing the turnout gear purchase 2020 Skylands area fire equipment for $72,053. I'm sorry, $72,053.89. Is there a motion to approve?
Make a motion.
Moved by Ms. Prone-Lambros.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Any questions or comments on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next, we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature, passed by a single vote. Are there any items anyone would like removed from the consent agenda?
Yes, I'd like to talk about number 2, please.
Okay. And why don't we first, so there's a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item 2?
I move to approve the consent agenda minus number 2.
Second.
It's moved by Ms. Niedergang, seconded by Mr. Cohen. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda passes, and now we'll take up Resolution 2127, resolution authorizing compliance with the United States Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's enforcement guidance on the consideration of arrest and conviction records and employment decisions under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
So my objection is procedural rather than anything else. I'm pretty sure the same thing happened last year. If you read this over very carefully, we are individually saying that we have read, that we have familiarized ourselves with the content of the United States Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's enforcement guidance, which again this year I looked up, as I believed I have done last year. And I would just please, if this is on the agenda for every year, like have a link in there or the document in there, because I don't want to swear that I've read anything without actually having had the opportunity to look at it, and I shouldn't have to try to Google it and look it up. So just a link or the document in there or something so that we know what we're swearing to.
Yeah,
I
the
prefer that.
language of the certification, which comes to us from the state, is unfortunate because, of course, you're not going to each individually read.
Well, I did.
I mean,
did.
yeah.
I
Well,
read it.
it's a good thing. I mean, that's very good that you did, but I just think it's also poorly. It's just a poorly worded certification.
Then just
as
something
well.
saying, even though you're swearing that you read it,
Yeah.
you don't really need to read it would be fine
No,
too.
I think your
but
point is well taken, and
Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you.
It doesn't actually say here that it's just authorizing compliance, and it's compliance by what? The municipality or by whom?
Well, the certification itself, that you're right about the resolution, but then there's an affidavit that you're all going to have to sign, and the affidavit itself says that you have familiarized, I think it says what, you familiarized yourself with the contents. I guess on the plus side, you've only had to familiarize yourself with the contents of the guidance document and not Title VII itself. So, thank goodness for that.
And I will say that this is somewhat listed on our goals for this year for the Civil Rights Commission, and so I would definitely refer this to the Civil Rights Commission and have the commission also review it.
Because it does contain a list of best practices. I mean, Princeton actually is really good on this stuff, but I think there's always.
Sorry,
I could
Mr.
say, Mr. DeShiel actually attended at the last meeting of the Civil Rights Commission where we had that discussion. In practice, Princeton's already doing this, but we want to review. There is a great document on best practices when considering criminal records in hiring, correct?
Yes, and then actually, as we reviewed those records, we are hitting all of the best practices in terms of the records checks and reviews. We reviewed that with the Civil Rights Commission and actually came up with, they had even some additional, well, they're going to provide me some additional feedback in that area so that we can ensure that one of the things was make sure there's a permanent policy that's written that will ensure that we continue to do this in the future.
And that our staff is trained as
Yes.
well.
Great. Okay. So is there?
I would like to make a motion to approve this resolution now that I
second it.
understand
Gang.
it.
I second it.
And seconded by Mr. Williamson. Any further comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes unanimously. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting is adjourned.